What's going on, guys? I'm Chase, and this is the Jackal Workbench.
This workbench is constructed entirely out of pine 2x8s and 2x10s. The top is 3 foot wide by 7 foot long by 3 1/4 inches thick. The legs are also laminated pine 4 1/2 inches squared, and the rails are 4 1/2 inches by 3 inches wide. If you'd like to see how I made it, then stick around. I originally went to 2 different home centers to get this lumber, but was really not happy with their selection, so I found that a lumber yard actually was a much better place to get this lumber. The first step after I let it dry in my shop for a couple weeks was to start cutting it all to its rough dimensions. This was one of my first projects where I actually made and used a cut list, and it really helped make my shop time a lot smoother and a lot more efficient, so I'll definitely be doing that a lot more in the future. I found it very helpful as I was cutting all of these pieces to label them, whether they were part of the top, or of the rails, or of the inner or outer legs. This really helped me keep everything in line, even when I had pieces that were similar sizes, and keep everything organized as well. Since I don't have a jointer, I went ahead and picked the flattest edge of each board and then used my table saw to try to rip a clean edge on all of my pieces before I started cutting them to their widths. And as I was ripping down the pieces for the top, I made sure that whenever I ripped a board, I labeled both pieces with the same number so that I could book match them when I glued up the top. Once everything was dimensioned, I went ahead and skip planed the 2 faces of each piece so that I would have a nice clean surface for glue. Next, I arranged the pieces for the top until I found a way that they fit together nicely. This is actually 2 1-foot beams that I'm gluing up, but I'm just gluing them together in the same clamps.
Let me explain what I just did. I took the second to last piece for each end of the workbench here. I took it out and I cut one piece of it into 4 feet. Then I have a piece roughly 2 foot and a piece roughly 1 foot. The only one that needs to be exact is the 4 foot. These two need to be exactly the same size. And then I've also got these spacers that are exactly the same width as the legs that will come through the table. So what I'm going to do is when I glue this up, I'm going to put this 4-foot piece there. I'll find a spot, just make sure this one and that one are in the same spot, and then use these spacers as I glue it up. So I'll make a tenon, or a mortise rather, for the leg to come up through the top. So let's see if this works.
I went ahead and taped the spacers in place with blue tape to hold them there while I was gluing up, and then after the glue had set up for about an hour, I came back with a mallet and a block and just knocked them through the underside of the table. Now, this glue up really just involved using plenty of glue and making sure to get it all spread evenly so you could get even coverage. Unfortunately, at this point, my camera actually ran out of memory, so I didn't get the footage for the rest of this glue up, and I also didn't film the glue up for the middle section that I also made.
Alright, so I didn't show the process of building this beam because it was exactly the same as what I went through building the other ones. The only difference was I didn't need to build any tenons because this is going to be the middle section. I would like to point out, however, that if you're making your own workbench, I would suggest, you probably saw when I built my first 2 beams, I built them and clamped them all together at the same time. I would actually suggest against that, this one just doing the one beam or the one section of the top by itself went so much smoother. Yeah, it's gonna take you a little bit more time, but in my mind, it's worth it. I wish I would have done those ones the same way because it was a lot easier to manage 1 foot instead of 2 foot. This one came out a lot, I can already tell it's gonna be way flatter. I'm barely gonna have to do anything to get it flat. Whereas these two, I've already done a lot of work to it. I'm gonna probably have to do a lot more before I can run them through my planer because they were real wavy and bumpy, which I know I could have avoided if I just would have done them 1 foot at a time instead of trying to do both of these at the same time. So, just a little tip, if you want to save yourself some hand planing and some work later and try to get your workbench top as flat as possible.
Next, my dad and I ran the 3 beams through the planer so that we could get them all to the same thickness and try to get them as flat as we could. This took quite a few passes with taking not a lot of material since the beams were so wide, but it was worth it in the end. Next, with some help from my little brother, I again used my table saw as a jointer and went ahead and just took a little bit of material off of each side that was going to be a gluing edge. Now my table saw blade didn't go all the way through these beams, so I came back afterward with my hand plane and went ahead and just removed that little extra bit of material so I had some nice clean flat edges. After that I used a T-square to make a reference line between my 2 mortises to keep them square and aligned. And then once that was done, it was time for the final glue up. Once again, this process just involved using plenty of glue and spreading it to get nice even coverage, and then using plenty of clamps to get nice even pressure. I also used my mallet to make sure I kept my reference lines lined up so that the leg frame would fit perfectly. And I also used some clamps and some boards and also some angle iron on the ends and also in the middle to try to keep these 3 beams as flat as they could be. I didn't have quite enough clamps that could go across this 3-foot span, so I had to take a couple of my pipe clamps and kind of hook them together to make a longer clamp. It worked fine, but having longer clamps would have been better. And then once that was done, I let it sit overnight, and this workbench top was done and ready to go. Now I could go ahead and move on to the leg frame assembly. Thank you guys so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please go ahead and like the video, and if you'd like to see more of my stuff, or if you'd like to see part 2 when it releases, please go ahead and subscribe so you won't miss it. But once again, thank you guys for watching. Hope y'all are having a great day. We'll see you next time.